Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the channel for another episode of Autoheterophiles, where I interview AGPs and AAPs about their experience. And today I'm here with Mr. Moon.
Hello.
And yeah, thank you for coming on the channel today, Mr. Moon.
Of course.
Um, yeah, usually I like to start with asking about sort of childhood stuff because chronologically it makes sense.
Yeah.
So, what um I guess it should be mentioned that you're 18 right now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, you this will be in a bit fresher memory for you than some of my other guests. But
hmm
um yeah, how can when you think back to your childhood, what were some of the first sort of thoughts or experiences you had that you can now categorize as coming from autogynephilia?
Um, I think I don't know. I other than like the phobic sort of feelings. I remember when I was little. I think I don't remember the exact age, but I know it was like around like right before middle school and like at the start of like kind of middle school, like sixth grade. I used to kind of pretend that I had breasts, as in like I would like hold my hands up to like kind of my chest and like cup them. I guess when I was like sort of really young. But we didn't really think of it like as just, I don't know how I really thought of it. It wasn't inherently like something I did to like arouse myself or anything like that. It was just like something I sort of did.
Yeah. And um was there any other things around that time, or was it just that?
That I can like currently remember. There was again like the autoandrophobia. Um I
That came
remember,
first?
yeah. Um I remember I used to, when I was little, I would kind of make like I would like play with like toys, I guess, and I would like I was like make a lot of like female characters to like do different like female voices. Um But yeah, the autoandrophobia mostly came first. I think the earliest kind of memory of that was when I was little. I was at a party at my aunt's house, and I remember my aunt going, "You're gonna look just like your cousin here." And he was this big, strong, like lumberjack-looking kind of guy, big beard, everything. And I just shook my head, and that kind of terrified me to like have like any look like that or have a beard or anything like that.
And, when you got older, say around puberty,
hmm
um, how did your feelings around gender change?
Um. hmm. Well, I didn't have many like feelings sort of around gender, but I did have sort of like around like the start of puberty, around like 12 or 13, I did have like some sort of desires to become feminized in some kind of capacity, like cross-dressing or something like that. But I didn't really have like thoughts about gender until I started kind of socially transitioning at 14.
What made you decide to start transitioning at 14?
Um, it was sort of kind of like a discussion with some friends I had at the time. And I remember before when I was like younger, I think at 10, I had told like one of my friends, I think I like that I might be trans or something like that after like watching like, Jazz Jennings or whatever. And they kind of were grossed out by it. And I sort of like buried that kind of desire in like the back of my head. And I told some friends about it at the time at 14, and they were like, well, do you want to like maybe try like socially transitioning or going by these pronouns or whatever? And it kind of just stuck like that until around like 15, around like sort of like fall of like that next year. And then I sort
And
of
how
just
did the what so the social transition entailed like a just a change of pronouns? Did you dress any different?
it started sort of with a change of pronouns. And then I dressed differently. I wore makeup. I started to grow out my hair. Um, different clothes. Like I think I already said that. But yeah,
And how did it help with your gender feelings at all? Like, how did it go?
it hmm, it sort of like it started off like with sort of like, I guess, euphoria. And like I sort of, I don't know, I liked looking in the mirror. I didn't have like a, sort of like the gross feelings I would get when I looked at like myself in like a sort of masculinized way. Um, but it's although oddly the dysphoria kind of changed in some kind of way. It went from feeling like grossed out by my masculine features. That still was there, but it also involved like this sort of feeling of wrongness in my gut, sort of whenever someone referred to me as male, um, you know, or stuff like that.
And was this something that your parents knew about?
They knew that I was socially like transitioning. I told them, and they sort of thought it was ROGD, not in the sense of like that they said the term ROGD. I don't think they ever knew that term or still don't, but they sort of described what ROGD was and thought that's what was going on with me.
Yeah. Why do you think they thought that?
I think maybe because like around the time I sort of started to like consider myself trans or socially transitioning, I was around a lot of FTMs or trans identified females at the time.
And um, how long did that phase of social transition last? And like, what sort of made you stop it?
Um, it sort of was on and off, sort of because I desisted twice, from 14 to a few months ago. Um, and the reason why first time I sort of desisted was my dysphoria. It didn't go away. At one point, it started to get worse. Or the disgust, and like it was, the disgust was gone at that point. It was more of just a feeling of the wrongness in my gut, kind of, that I had, and it just got worse in some regards. So I thought maybe I wasn't trans, and so I sort of just desisted, and it didn't really change. The way I felt didn't really change. I still had that kind of feeling. So eventually, I started socially transitioning again. Um, by sort of like cutting my bangs and like having more feminine hairstyle again, and I that went on until I was 16, I think. Um, in which I sort of just thought like, I don't know, I felt like I don't really know what was this sort of motive at that point. I think it might have been mostly because I couldn't pass as easily as I did before. Um, and I sort of started to like sort of present more androgynously, like stop wearing makeup and just wearing like sort of gender neutral clothes. And that went on, and it and like the first time I desisted, I was like totally repressed. I never like cross dressed. I never did anything, and it was sort of very like a tough time. And I think like a big part of that was why like the second time I desisted was rougher than the first time, was mostly because I was sort of repressed. I never cross dressed or anything like that. And I don't know, maybe that had something to do with it. And then eventually I sort of just started socially transitioning again around that summer. And I sort of kept on socially transitioning until like a few months or weeks ago.
So you did social transition up until like about a month ago,
Yeah.
and you stopped again. Why'd you stop this time?
Um, there was sort of a few reasons. Part of it was I thought maybe my dating life would be easier. Another part was that I sort of would look back at like pictures of me when I first time I desisted and sort of like liked the way I looked more then and kind of missed it. And I just thought maybe it would also like be like an easier path. And there was also some people around me who kind of encouraged me to desist as well.
And how how's your current bout of desistance going?
Um, well, it's going pretty well. I still have some like sort of discomfort. I still try to like with like the grossness of like with like my facial hair or my shoulders and stuff, and I try to like present and like I still sort of like present femininely or um and wear makeup and stuff, but I'm trying to like sort of go back to like like having a more boyish kind of haircut or like hairstyle. I'm planning on getting a haircut that's around the summer that's a lot more masculine, I suppose.
Are you what's uh, your sort of plan for the future for dealing with like the desire to transition or be feminine?
Um, Sort of just try to find different ways to cope with it, and if it doesn't, with like music, like cross dressing or being feminine or whatever, I started trying to being like a feminine male or a guy, and or just be gender non-conforming and see if that works. And if it doesn't, I maybe go back and sort of socially transition. Not socially transition, medically. If it doesn't sort of work out.
Yeah. Uh, Have you tried to have you wanted to pursue medical transition before, but like why haven't you yet?
Mostly because of my parents. When I was a minor, they didn't want me to because they were scared I was going to regret it, and that was sort of just a phase. Um, so they didn't really want me to kind of pursue any sort of medicalization. And now that I'm 18, I sort of like I just sort of couldn't because of that, and they wouldn't like let me, even though I've had some therapists who said they would have signed me off for HRT.
Have have you explained autogynephilia to anyone in real life?
Mm, no, but I've explained one to one person who I thought was autoandrophilic. You know that like this is probably what like you're going through, and I kind of explained that to them. I've explained to like some people. I actually have. I think I've explained it to some people, but like not my own personal experience with it. More so just the concept.
Right. Okay, so you haven't uh like explained to your parents where like your desire to be feminine comes from?
No.
Do you ever think you will?
Um. There's. I mean, I'm the type of person to never really say never. But as far as like I can see now, it's more of sort of just a sort of awkward conversation to kind of explain to them.
Yeah, fair enough. It's not for everyone to explain it.
Yeah.
Um, how do you feel about the trans community?
Um. I don't know. I feel like there's like a lot of it. I disagree with a lot of it. How it has to deny with autogynephilia. I think that kind of holds people back from understanding their conditioning and knowing how to work with it. Um. But I mostly just I don't know. I just see that's my biggest sort of issue with it, and also like how they kind of like try to go into women's spaces and stuff like that and encourage people to do that. Um. But yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Did, did they I'm curious about this just because you're younger. Did was transgenderism taught in schools? Like how do schools how have they handled the issue of transgender? identity?
Um, I have never sort of had anyone kind of like how talk about what transgender is in class. I've never kind of had that. I never sort of learned about it from any of my teachers as far as I can remember. Um, I've not no, I've seen like the most I've seen is like maybe like pride flags in like classrooms, like a tiny little pride flag sticker or something, but like nothing like really like taught.
Okay. Um, are you in contact with any like self-aware AGP online spaces?
Um, Not I mean, I'm in, Ask AG r/Ask AGP, but other than that, not really any kinda, like, online groups of, like, AGPs or anything like that. I used to be, though. I used to be in this one Discord server with, one HSTS and a bunch of, AGPs, but that was really it.
And how did you first learn about autogynephilia?
Um, Through Twitter, it was sort of back when I was, like, still a TRA, and I remember someone talking about it, and I was sort of never heard the term autogynephilia or AGP or anything like that. And I sort of looked it up, and I was like, "Oh, this is the whole like trans is a fetish BS," back when I was like a TRA, and that was like my first kind of interaction with it. Um, but yeah.
And w- when you heard about it and recognized yourself in the description, like how did you feel about it?
Well, I first kind of recognized myself with it after watching like Ray Alex Williams and how he kind of explained it as not just being like this sort of like thing where you're constantly turned on, and it's more deeper than that. It's more complex. Um, and how it has like emotional and romantic aspects to it. Sort of was some the way that in like a lot of the different ways that he sort of described it was how I sort of found it like described me. Um at first it kind of like bothered me because I was very like anti AGP. At that point, I was like sort of left the whole TRA thing and was like sort of a the trans medicalist sort of a community. And I thought that AGPs were sort of like the bad trans, like the whole stereotype of like they're ruining my acceptance, they're ruining my public reception, they're causing my problems. And sort of finding out that I was a part of that group that I sort of had a thought was causing my problems kind of messed with my head at a point. Um, and I sort of eventually got into like denial after sort of watching the shapeshifter interview, after seeing like how much I sort of related to shapeshifter in a lot of ways with their story. But then I sort of met some people like in that Discord mentioned earlier, who sort of like explained that like how it sort of that it probably was it for like a few different reasons. Um, but yeah.
Yeah. What was the emotional process like for coming to terms with being autogynephilic? Because you said like you felt poorly about that group at first, and then you realized you were in that group. Like, how did you work through that?
Um, I honest it was sort of like trying to like see them and through without a different light as like not just like the bad trans, not just like the people, the bad people who are going into women's space and trying to harm them and stuff, and seeing that like not all of them are that, you know, some of them aren't bad people just because you're AGB, you're not a bad person. And sort of like reworking my like view of what AGP is and what AGPs are in my head sort of was how I kind of got through it.
And where are you now in that process?
I'm sort of just kind of accepted it and just sort of like in an odd way kind of helps me like sort of knowing that like where this kind of desire of feminization kind of comes from. Um and like how to deal with it and stuff like that.
What sort of ways of dealing with it have you found?
Um, I mean, sort of just presenting femininely as I kind of have since like a while. Um, and like other stuff like that. Yeah.
Um, hmm. Do you have you ever experienced like gender envy? And if so, like what sort of situations brought that up?
Um, I have, I guess. It was like either like sort of characters in like movies or like people I'd see on scrolling through TikTok. Um, some of it was like women, and then some of it was like effeminate men, not in the sense of like the whole like um what's the like the trans sort of like a trans woman, but like more so just like a guy who's like presenting femininely but still is like a guy, I guess. Um, I sort of got envy from that, and again like this regular woman.
What kind of um, things have caused you to feel gender euphoria?
Um, Sort of like makeup like doing my hair or present like where like looking in the mirror after like being like all sort of like done up and like you know makeup, dressed up and everything like that. And one thing was like after like shaving and feeling like my face like smooth and like sort of feeling like my face without like facial hair was another thing.
Does when facial hair grows in, does it bother you?
Yeah, like sort of even like looking in the mirror and seeing it, or like just even touching my face and feeling it, bothers me, and a lot of the time.
Are you planning on getting laser or electrolysis for it?
Maybe in some if I can like afford it. There was like a long time where I kind of just like begged my parents to get it when I was younger, but they never like they would tell me like, oh, it's not fully permanent and all this other stuff. So I don't know. But I've considered it for like a very long time and kind of wanted it.
Yeah, because if I remember right, you said in your interview with Anna that you shave every day.
Yeah, or at least try to whenever I leave the house and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I found that it's every day leads to. I mean, for me personally, it's a lot of skin irritation,
Mhm.
and it's yeah, kind of a hassle.
Yeah, definitely can be, but like it's at least it helps though with like just like mentally.
Yeah. Do you um when you look to your future, do you plan on getting married or having kids or anything like that?
Yeah, getting married. I don't think I'd want to have like biological children. I think I might want to adopt. Um, but yeah, but that's mostly because I've heard from some people that I don't know if this is fully true, but I've heard like some people say that paraphilias can be like genetic and like passed down, and I wouldn't want to like pass down like this to like my kids or anything.
Yeah, it hasn't really been measured well yet in terms of the heritability of it, but autogynephilia, at least from it seems like there's a high amount of anecdotes of people having multiple cases of this within the family, or
Yeah.
yeah, and the studies typically find that they measure the heritability of like child to gender nonconformity or gender variant behavior or gender dysphoria,
Mhm.
and the estimates vary widely,
Mm.
but the studies always find that it is heritable to some degree. So yeah, I think you're probably right in thinking that it's partly genetic.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. Usually when I interview people, they're older, so I'm not quite sure. Like, it feels like you have less life experience to draw upon.
Mm.
Um, what's like? Are you planning on going to college?
Yeah, next year, yeah.
Yeah. What are you gonna study?
Um, Animal science or, like, veterinary stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you like about that?
I kinda, like, just, like no, I know that, like, for sure that I want whatever career I kinda go into, I wanna, like, help people or just anything in general, like animals or, like, a bigger cause. I like helping people in general. Um, and I also just like animals as well. And I thought, like, kinda combining those 2 as, like, helping animals and, like, sort of, like, doing both. Um, and that's kinda, like, how I looked at it. If there's, like, other, like, careers that I thought about getting into, like, maybe nursing or psychology and or what's the other, psychiatry. Yeah.
Yeah, you just want a job where you're actually tangibly helping people and feeling like you're making an impact.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably a wise course of action to go through.
Yeah.
Why were you willing to do an interview about autogynephilia?
Well, sort of just to, like with Anna, it was mostly just to get my story out there and, like, sort of, like, maybe some people, like, resonate with it. And also, like and, like, with Anna, her, like, thing was mostly to, like, help Anne Lawrence, and I thought maybe, help out with, like, sort of research was something, like that was a big motivation of it, and also, like, just, like, showing, like, what it can, like, how, like, this can manifest, and especially with, like, younger people, because I feel like not enough people, like, acknowledge that and sort of, like, toss off those kinda, like and the all whole ROGD boy thing.
Yeah, do you think ROGD boys are like a real thing, or do you think it's just autogynephilia?
I think it's mostly just autogynephilia.
Yeah, me too. Um,
Mm.
what what about for the girls?
I think for girls, there definitely is, an ROGD aspect in that. I think some of it I think it's definitely for girls. Um, yeah, just not like boys. I feel like there isn't, like, sort of, like, like, the way the ROGD is, like, you get, like, sort of social, like what's the word? Like, to, like, a group to fit into, I don't think or, like, social, like,
You get like praise and inclusion.
yeah, and I don't think you necessarily get that from, like, the MTF group. If anything, somewhat the opposite.
What do you mean by the opposite?
Like, I feel like there's, like, a lot of, like, younger, or MTFs in general will kinda, like, if especially if, like, you're younger transition will, like, maybe get bullied, whether it be online or in, like, real life, and, like, you know, I don't know, I don't think, like a lot of people just kind of view, like, any kind of MTF as, like, fetishist or, like, gross or whatever the hell.
And are you worried about being seen that way?
In some ways, yeah. Yeah, it definitely was for a very long time, and I guess still am.
Does that impact your behavior?
Um, it definitely did, in some, yeah, especially when I was like, sort of trans mad. I sort of like again like was very against AGP and stuff like that. So it sort of impacted that and like sort of motivated me to like go against it and sort of just push back and be like just to show that like, hey, I'm not one of these people. I'm not one of the gross sort of people who want to like hurt people or do bad with like whatever you know.
Yeah. And in your experience with dealing with um, just encountering trans women, either in person or online, like what proportion of them do you think are HSTS and which proportion are AGP?
I think majority are AGP. I've met only like 4 MTFs in my life. The and maybe I know 5. But when I sort of just only met once. But like the ones that I got to like know personally, I've only known like 4, and majority I think were like from are of the autogynephilic type, mostly because either they're bisexual, they're very non-passing, and they're kind of the transbian. They consider some like lesbians and stuff. There was one that was like very passing. I knew that I thought was that I thought was HSCS, and I don't know, but I've talked to like some people about them, and they thought like maybe they weren't. For like something that most there was something I found like kind of like fun, silly, I guess, but like they thought that they were in HSCS because they were kind of goth. But yeah,
Yeah, no, that is funny. Because it's like
wait, hold on, give me
whenever
a
I've
second.
seen like a
I'm
sort of
sorry.
goth aesthetic among trans women, they're like always obviously the autogynephilic type.
Wait, hold on, I'm sorry. I'll be right back. Yeah.
What was it like growing up with trans ideology around?
Um, it sort of like affected sort of the way I sort of looked at the world, and how I sort of looked at myself, I guess. The way it like sort of made me like think about the world was like it was sort of like it made me think the world's out to get me, especially with like the whole saying, oh, there's a trans genocide and stuff like that. Um, that sort of like made me think like, oh, the world's that hates me, the world hates me, the world's out to get me and stuff like that. Um, and sort of made me build like sort of a victim mentality that wasn't like really the case, and mostly in reality, majority of people really don't care. Um, well, then some they care, but like not as much as like I sort of thought, in the sense of like everyone's like they're trying to hurt me or something, and I'm gonna get harmed by just simply going outside. Um, in most cases, that really isn't happening. Um, and I guess like the way it sort of made me look at myself was like sort of like trying to figure out like what a label kind of like what I was, or like the whole gender identity thing. Um, Sort of trying to figure out like where I was or what I was, or I guess. But yeah,
How would you like the trans ideology to change if you could change it?
I think it would maybe put up more like sort of boundaries and more, um, sort of take more responsibility of like the bad like sort of people, like the people like using like it for like bad things, or like have malicious intent. And sort of like going back to like accepting, I don't know, maybe not like accepting the whole like HSTS typology, because I think majority of them aren't going to ever do that, but maybe just acknowledging the fact that AGP is a thing, I guess. At least I guess. And just again like sort of having boundaries around like bathrooms or sports, or childhood transitioning and stuff like that.
How did social media impact your gender development?
Um, It's sort of like I think in some ways may have, like, fed into it, um, but sort of, like, when I was 14, I sort of downloaded TikTok, and it was, like, a lot of, like, trend stuff, and even, like, now, even though I, like, sort of, like, avoid that I don't really like that stuff or, like, those kinda posts, you still kinda get them every once in a while, and it sort of, like, fed me, this kind of, um this, like, sort of, like, to push me down, like, this sort of pathway, and, like, sort of like how I again, like, with how I viewed the world of, like, trying to like, how I saw, like, the world hating me, or trying to figure out, like, what sort of gender, identity was, like, mine or whatever, and stuff like that.
Um, yeah, I guess just to wrap up, I'll ask you a question that I ask most people that come on the channel,
Mhm.
and that's, um, what would you want other AGPs to know?
That maybe that, like hmm, that it can be, like, manageable. There's different ways to, I guess, manage it, and that it's not always, like, transition or repression. I don't think, like, a lot of people sort of view it as those are, like, kind of the 2 only options, either, like, full-blown, like, transition or just you have to repress. I think that's one thing that I think not enough people, like, sort of know, um, that, like, it can be, like, integrated in different ways. There's different ways to, like, deal with it, other than that, and sort of about, like, the anal erotic, AGP and how, like, it's not just, like, how that sort of works, and it's not just, like, always, like, the trans being, and there's other, like, different, like, subtypes of AGP, I suppose.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for taking the time to come on my channel today, Mr. Moon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.